There's this kind of buzz, in global circles right now, a sort of watchfulness about what happens after 2029.
Yeah, specifically about whether another leader, maybe someone like Donald Trump, could emerge.
Exactly. And we've been digging into a New York Times report that really tries to unpack the international anxieties around this.
Right.
So our mission today is to really pull out the key shifts in global relations that these worries seem to be causing based on what the report says.
And what's really striking, I think, is how proactively countries seem to be, well, adjusting. They're anticipating potential U.S. policy shifts.
Hmm.
The report definitely highlights this trend towards, let's say, greater independence, particularly trade and security.
Absolutely. And you see some big moves happening, like the EU and several South American countries setting up this pretty large new trade zone.
That's a big one.
It feels like a clear signal, doesn't it? Countries looking beyond their usual go-to partners.
Exactly. It's like strategic diversification.
Yeah.
They aren't necessarily dropping the U.S., but they're definitely building up alternatives, solidifying them.
Yeah, backups.
Think about Canada. The report mentions Prime Minister Mark Carney suggesting new transport networks.
Right, to access markets besides the U.S.
Precisely. And it's not just trade, is it?
No, that's the other thing. Canada is apparently talking with Europe about joining their military expansion efforts.
That's a really notable step, moving security ties outside that traditional North American setup.
It is. And you also see the UK and the EU working on a defense agreement.
Right. So it's not just isolated incidents. It looks more like a coordinated shift, maybe, or at least a shared direction towards stronger alliances among themselves.
Okay, so let's get into the why a bit more. Why does this worry about a potential second Trump seem to stick around? The report has some interesting takes here.
Well, this touches on something crucial, the root causes.
Yeah.
Ian Golden, he's a professor at Oxford, offers a really compelling perspective.
What's his angle?
He basically argues that the things that originally fueled Trump's support, economic insecurity, widening inequality, those things are deep-seated. They won't just disappear when he leaves office.
He doesn't mince words, does he? There's that quote where he says the mega base and J.D. Vance will still be around long after Trump's gone.
Exactly. So the worry isn't just about one person. It's about the conditions, the environment that allowed that movement to gain so much ground in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Golden really hammers this home. He says something like, no matter who next occupies the White House, the conditions that propelled the Make America Great Again movement, widening inequality and economic insecurity remain.
So the potential for disruption is still there.
That's the core of the anxiety, I think. He adds, there is still a worry that there could be another Trump in the future. It's these ongoing systemic issues.
And this worry, according to the report, is actually starting to ripple into research and academia, too. There's talk about a potential brain drain.
Yeah, that's a serious concern. The idea is that researchers, both American and international ones, might start looking elsewhere, for funding, for jobs, for academic freedom, if they feel the environment in the U.S. is becoming less stable or supportive.
That would be a huge loss of talent.
Absolutely. A significant hit to innovation and research leadership.
Orville Schell from the Asia Society puts it really starkly. He's quoted saying, "This is a revolution dedicated to destroying not only policies, but institutions."
Wow.
Yeah, that quote really underscores how deep the anxiety runs. It's not just about policy tweaks.
Exactly. It frames the concern as something potentially more fundamental, a potential challenge to the very structures, the institutions that underpin international cooperation and, well, intellectual progress.
Okay, so let's quickly recap what we've pulled from this New York Times report in our deep dive today.
Sure.
We're seeing clear signs of international partners actively building more independent paths, especially in trade and security alliances. Think U-South America, Canada, UK-EU.
Right. And underlying all that is this persistent concern highlighted by folks like Golden that the socioeconomic factors behind the MAGA movement haven't gone away.
Which feeds the worry about similar political shifts happening again down the line.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the potential impact on institutions, particularly the fear of a brain drain in the research community, as Schell pointed out.
It really paints a picture of a world trying to adapt proactively to this perceived uncertainty about the future U.S. role.
Like kind of global hedging, perhaps.
Definitely. Which leaves us and you with a pretty big question to chew on. Given these shifts, the independent alliances, the potential for ongoing domestic political volatility in the U.S., what does this all mean for the long-term balance of global power and cooperation, regardless of who's actually in the White House?
Yeah, what are the lasting implications? Something to think about.